The DLC is on its way. It's on its way. It is coming. It is coming. It is coming. Hopefully by January. There are so many leaks coming out talking about how this game is going to have a DLC within the next few months, and I cannot be more excited. So before we get into that, if you have not played Black Myth Wukong, you need to play it right now. Black Myth Wukong is by far, no question, hands down my game of the year. It's better than Astrobot, the Astro GOAT, probably a top 3 game this year. I even think it's better than Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, so you have to play this immediately if you have not played it. That way when the DLC launches, you can fucking play the DLC. So let's get into why people think the DLC is going to be coming out and the reports that have come out surrounding the DLC and when it's going to release. And then on top of that, I want to have a discussion on what I think could improve the game in the DLC and what I would love to see in a DLC from the Game Science team. So an article here has come out a couple weeks ago by Abian Khan. And this is saying that Black Myth Wukong DLC is planned for early 2025. Now, who is saying that? Who is saying that? Is this a reliable source? Is it Game Science themselves? Let's get to that. So according to a China-based journalist and games industry consultant, Daniel Camilo, an expansion is set for release in early 2025, and this DLC is planned around the time of the Chinese New Year, which begins on January 29th, 2025. Now, why is this so early in my opinion? Like, this DLC is coming out quick. They're coming quick. Pause. They are coming real quick with this. And I think that's because, you can even see right here, Black Myth Wukong was originally leaked to have 13 different chapters. And due to different budget constraints, etc., they had to reduce those chapters into 6 longer form chapters that feature all 6 distinctive areas that you saw and played in the game. So most likely there was a lot more content that they either had to put to the side that wasn't finished, or there was already plans of DLC saying if this game does well, we're going to put a lot of this content into the DLC. So if that content has already been getting worked on consistently, I have a feeling that that's a big reason why this is coming out so soon after the initial game's release. Now, it says importance. Black Myth Wukong has emerged as one of the standout titles of the year. It's considered a strong contender for the prestigious Game of the Year award. With its innovative gameplay, stunning visuals, captivating narrative. Oh, yes please. The excitement for additional content and future updates is sky high. That's absolutely correct. It is sky high. Great movie, by the way. Make a Sky High 2. Please, brother. Camilo claimed he received information from very reliable first-hand sources. So he is basically claiming here that he talked to the Game Science team or somebody on the Game Science team that has given him this information, indicating that the DLC could arrive, not that it would, but it could arrive right at the end of January or very soon after. Huge. However, he cautioned that plans could change, noting the internal roadmaps and release dates, blah, blah, blah. We know. Look at Assassin's Creed Shadows. That shit got bumped for 3 more months. While Black Myth Wukong's DLC has not been officially confirmed, Game Science investor Hero Games recently informed Bloomberg that an expansion is indeed in development. Ooh, so this is another source here, directly from Game Science. Obviously an investor, not someone part of the team, but they're someone that's going to most likely know a lot about when the release dates are going to be, or the upcoming projects are going to be for a specific studio they're invested in, depending on how much they've invested. Additionally, Camilo's sources suggest the game has already sold 20 million copies. We know this. It was like 18 million in 2 weeks. With a development budget of approximately 70 million, it is reported generated over $800 million in revenue so far. This puts it up with the likes of Grand Theft Auto 5 and Modern Warfare in terms of fastest selling games of all time. Now, what do I want to see in the Black Myth Wukong DLC after I've played the full game, played the New Game Plus, beat pretty much every single boss, and am touting it as my bona fide game of the year of 2024? Well, there's a couple things. And while I loved the game, I do not think it was a perfect game. I do think there are many different improvements they can actually improve within Black Myth Wukong in a couple different aspects. I don't even think it was a 10 out of 10 game. I would give this a 9 out of 10. It was not a full masterpiece. However, for a studio's first AAA game, it's as close to a masterpiece as you can possibly get. So let's go into what I think could be improved in Black Myth Wukong DLC that could hopefully overall improve the entire game. And the first and this is the biggest issue I had with the entire game, is the exploration. The exploration in Black Myth Wukong is the only part of the game I would say is generally actually bad. And I hope that doesn't rub everybody the wrong way, but it's actually bad. When you go up against 100 different invisible walls, and then you walk into one thing that looks like an invisible wall, and it ends up being a secret room that provides incredible benefits for Wukong, your character, it pisses me off. That is, it's the most annoying thing in the game, because then you have to go and check every single invisible wall in the entire game and waste your time just for the off chance that one might be a little bit of a secret room. There are also secret areas that are impossible to find without seeing them on the internet, like in Chapter 2 when you have to break the wall with the boss or your head bonk. Pause. You have to do one of those things just to break the wall and activate kind of like the whole Wukong quest line, or at least go to fight the first Wukong in Chapter 1, and then go to, obviously, the waterfall in Chapter 2, or the sand, quote-unquote, fall in Chapter 2, and fight the Black Wukong. That is super annoying, because there's no way you possibly could have known to do that, unless I missed something. There's no way you could have possibly known to do that. Not that secrets shouldn't be in there, but I think the game should provide a little bit more clarity, and I think the game should open up these invisible walls and provide crafted experiences where players can more freely explore. And maybe that's not something they can add into this DLC, especially if a lot of this content was already in the works, but if they ever do, which I think is already confirmed as well, a Black Myth Wukong 2, or not confirmed, but suspected, they need to add that in there. They need to make it more explorable for you going through the game, whatever, that game might be in the future, but hopefully in the DLC. If you guys remember when you first get your cloud in Chapter 6 and you're flying all around, what is the first thing that reminds you of? For me, it was Elden Ring, when you have your mount and you're going around on your mount and there's open world areas and there's these different specific areas that you actually go and fight either different bosses, or there's like a dungeon, etc. If they're going to do a DLC, and this DLC is going to keep the cloud, and you're not going to go around just on foot everywhere, what I think they need to do is build out maybe 1 to 2 chapters. So maybe 2 chapters worth of content. I think a good DLC would be like 33%, 1/3 of the original game of content. I think that's a very good length for a DLC, especially if it's a free DLC, but hopefully if it's like a $20, $30 DLC, let's be honest, it'll probably be $40. But I think if you increase the game's content by about 33%, so maybe 1 to 2 chapters, hopefully a chapter that's as long and fulfilling as Chapter 3, and you keep your mount or you keep your little cloud, they could make huge areas that are bunches of different bosses, but you're flying around, and then they can have, just like Elden Ring, little quote-unquote dungeon areas where you go and you fight the main bosses of that area. I think that'd be much cooler than Chapter 6, where you just went around, found one boss, killed him, found one boss, killed him. Even though I loved Chapter 6, it was one of my favorite chapters, it felt extremely empty in the open world. I think that would be very cool, and that would help eliminate a lot of those different invisible wall issues, so you can actually go around and fly. Now, obviously, there's going to be invisible walls that you can fly around as well, but it feels a lot better hitting an invisible wall after you've flown for 15 minutes and not found one than it does every 2 seconds and you're checking every single one. And that way, when you're actually going into these smaller, more handcrafted experiences or quote-unquote dungeons, you can be pretty sure that everything in there is not an invisible wall and something you're actually able to go and explore, whether it does have a secret or whether it doesn't. Now, what else would I like to see in a Black Myth Wukong DLC? Because I think Black Myth Wukong does everything else good, great, or best in its class. The first thing, and this is going off of the hopefully 2 extra chapters of content that they give us in the actual world, but I would like to see more relics associated with those. At least 1 or 2 more relics to keep refining and defining the type of build that we have already created for our Wukong character in the game. And additionally, more weapons, more armor, more set bonuses, more unique effects on the weapons, just in general, more things to actually craft new builds and craft new ways to go and beat all of the different bosses. Now, the next thing I think, going along with those bosses, is a boss rush mode. I think having a boss rush mode would be fucking awesome for this game. A lot of people say the normal game's already a boss rush, and although it does feel like that at times, especially earlier on in the game, it is definitely not. There's a ton to explore, etc. But I think a boss rush mode for this game is perfect. Absolutely perfect. There's no better game mode that they can include in this game other than a boss rush mode. At times, it feels like in between the bosses is boring because you're just trying to get to the next boss and pop off. And there's so many bosses in this game. I think a boss rush mode that is actually a little bit customizable would be awesome. And what do I mean by customizable? Like, you can even choose, these are the different bosses I want in the boss rush mode. These are the different bosses I want to go head to head on. So you can add different side bosses in there. You can add different main bosses in there. You can maybe change the difficulty between the normal game and some new game pluses. You can take your character in, or you can actually design all of your own abilities. Not design, but you can choose all of your abilities. You can choose your armor, and you can actually craft your own type of build to go into the boss rush mode and see how fast you're killing these bosses. And the last thing that I've actually seen some people talking about is like a multiplayer mode in this game, and it got me thinking what that would kind of look like. Now, I want single player games to be single player games a lot of the time. I don't think everything can work with a multiplayer mode. If you look at Ghost of Tsushima, that had a great multiplayer mode, but if you look at a lot of other games, they have terrible multiplayer modes because they're completely designed around single player. And I think that is very similar for Black Myth Wukong. I think the combat, the bosses, everything with the story, it's all designed really around a single player experience. But if they did add a multiplayer, what would that look like? What would I think be cool for a multiplayer mode, just for kind of shits and gigs? I genuinely think it's going to be very hard to do the story with a multiplayer mode. I think these bosses would get absolutely crushed within seconds, but I think if they did something like a Wukong v Wukong PvP mode, that would be pretty badass. I think the combat actually kind of does lend itself a little bit well for a PvP mode, especially with all of like the stuns, all of like the going invisible. I don't think the duplicates would work very well. They would have to balance out what you can actually put in the DLC mode and what you can't. But cooking other Wukongs in one hit would feel pretty damn good, to be honest. And I think one could just be like the awakened Wukong, or one could be like the Wukong you fight at the end of the game, and the other could be your actual Wukong, and you could just throw it in the story like that. Throw it in that a couple different maps of you basically fighting the last Wukong. One person could be the one that is coming up as the new Wukong, and the other can be the old Wukong. They gotta fight against each other, and it goes from there. I don't know. Story-wise, it probably doesn't make sense at all, but I don't think they're ever going to add this in. I just thought it would be cool to kind of talk about it. I think the way to do it would be a PvP mode. I think that would be pretty damn awesome. Thank you guys for watching the video. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe if you want more content like this. We are almost at 250 subscribers, which is the coolest thing in the entire world to me. So thank you guys so much for loving the content, loving the clips, loving the streams, etc. And then comment down below if you guys think there's anything that you would want to see in the Black Myth Wukong DLC. If you agree with what I said, if you think a multiplayer mode would be cool, if you think a boss rush mode would be cool, just let me know what you guys think down below. Would love to talk about this a little bit more. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.